Mark Hill from Greenleafs. So the news tonight is all about Andrew Neil roasting Barry Gardiner of the Labour Party about the so-called privatisation of the NHS. And he's ended up in a mincing of words between journalist and politician about what the definition of privatisation genuinely is. Let's just take Barry Gardiner's point at face value. What he's claiming is that there is an academic, Dr. Andrew Hill, who is maintaining that a trade agreement with the USA could create a new levelling of prices that the NHS pays for its pharmaceuticals across the board to US levels or something approaching them. And the amounts of the difference in prices are eye-wateringly expensive. They are very, very serious, and it would over double the £18 billion that the NHS currently spends on pharma. There is a risk that any government, a government of whatever colour, could negotiate a stupid trade deal. A trade deal that contains a big gap like this by agreeing through a trade treaty to abolish NICE, which essentially through recommending which drugs can be issued by NHS doctors, it essentially helps to control the price and helps reinforce the monopolistic buying power of the NHS in the world drugs market. But just because there is a risk of a government doing something stupid, does that mean that the government shouldn't do it? You see, there is always a risk when you're negotiating something internationally, as Corbyn himself knows through the backwash of his discussions to try and achieve some sort of dialogue over the question of Palestine. As Corbyn himself keeps saying, we need to keep talking, jaw rather than war. Now, I think the reason why the British political class is so stuck on this question of international trade agreements is that they haven't done it for a long time. They have delegated that particular power to the European Union, and the European Union has proved itself with very coercive agreements such as TTIP that it's not particularly good at negotiating either with the Americans or anyone else. As a result of delegating our trade negotiating power to the European Union, we've actually ended up with very few agreements, and particularly not with our principal customer, the USA, Canada, Australia and many other countries with whom we ought to be trading, such as China and India. Now, surely the Labour Party can see that in principle it has got to be good for us to be negotiating with these other countries on trade. After all, we want trade agreements that include minimum labour standards, in particular no slavery, no use of political prisoners. We want agreements to control listed products such as ivory. We want animal cruelty to be minimised. But this has never been part of the public debate before, because essentially it's been buried inside the European Union, and the text of treaties such as TTIP has been largely secret. The answer is to throw the light of public attention onto it. We want greater analysis, we want more agreements. Sure, there are risks, but we have to go into these negotiations with an open mind. We have to go into them wanting certain things and not being prepared to concede absolutely everything. It's very important that the agreements themselves are adaptable. They're open, but they are adaptable in the event that we find out that there are serious problems with them, such as inadvertently negotiating a sudden doubling or trebling of our pharmaceutical prices. That is not acceptable. It's not politically acceptable. So what we want is actually more trade agreements, more public attention, more political attention and accountability, not simply closing down the debate and not having any trade agreements at all, or delegating it to an unaccountable bureaucracy at the European Union level, which is what we have done hitherto. People are beginning to realise that these trade agreements have immense power, and that power needs to be subject to popular control.